Right. The two major problems the Obama administration has this week are the AIG bonus situation and former Vice President Cheney stirring up some controversy.
Do you believe the President of the United States has made Americans less safe?
I do. I think those programs were absolutely essential to the success we enjoyed of being able to collect the intelligence that led us defeat all further attempts to launch attacks against the United States since 9/11.
I guess Rush Limbaugh was busy. So they trotted out the next most popular member of the Republican cabal.
This is a former Vice President of the United States. Is that the attitude? Is that the sanctioned tone toward the former Vice President of the United States from this White House now?
Sometimes I ask forgiveness rather than for permission, Chip. But no, I hope my sarcasm didn't mask the seriousness of the answer.
All right, joining us now from Washington, Fox News analyst Karl Rove. First of all, there used to be, it's gone now, Jimmy Carter destroyed it, used to be a kind of unwritten rule that presidents and vice presidents didn't criticize the sitting president and vice president. Gerald Ford told me that when I interviewed him shortly before he died. He said, look, this was the rule that had gone down through history. That seems to be gone now, correct?
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes it was not really honored. There were times in the 60s and the 50s in which Harry Truman was very crusty after he left office, for example, of being critical of Dwight Eisenhower at times. But generally, you're right. Presidents and vice presidents restrain their comments. I appreciate Dick Cheney's candor. He was asked a pretty straightforward question. He gave a pretty straightforward and I thought an honest answer. What surprised me was, frankly, the tone of Mr. Gibbs, who sounded like some wisecracking junior high smart mouth. And it would have been better both for Obama and for the country if Mr. Gibbs had, if he felt necessary to responded on the merits of the issue rather than putting such a heavy emphasis on his little sarcastic flip comments.
All right.
Because these are real issues. These are real issues.
Absolutely. And I think that the vice president wants to get across to the nation that the success of the Bush administration was blunting the terror attacks that were launched after 9/11. And there were plenty of them. And the Bush administration, as the vice president rightly said, defeated them. And now the apparatus in which that happened is being torn down. However, it looks to me like Vice President Cheney, who won't appear on this program, by the way, it's interesting because he doesn't come into these kinds of forums. He doesn't want to debate. He wants to state. Would that be accurate? Cheney doesn't want to debate. He wants to state.
I think Cheney's willing to be interviewed is the way that I would put it. I mean,
but he doesn't want to back and forth.
Yeah, well, he feels, I think, most comfortable receiving tough questions as possible from a journalist and not engaging in a debate. I grant you that.
Okay.
But I watched the thing, and it was a pretty tough interview. And
I don't think so. I don't think King was tough on him because he basically allowed Cheney, and this is why Cheney went on with King at CNN. He allowed Vice President Cheney to set the agenda. I mean, he didn't. And look, I'm not criticizing King. I'm saying that different people have different interview styles. But I would be much more specific, as you know better than anybody else on earth, Mr. Rove. I would have been much more specific in challenging the vice president about what happened and why it happened, trying to draw some information out of the man that we don't already know. But I agree with you that Gibbs, I think, made a mistake because we're talking about people's lives here. And I said that they made a mistake getting Rush Limbaugh involved in policy as well, because we're talking about recession here. We're talking about people suffering here. Go ahead.
And look, your evidence, you presented evidence earlier in your talking points about the result of all this. We have seen in the last several weeks in the poll, the Rasmussen poll that you talked about. There was also a Pew poll issued this morning that said that Obama's job approval has dropped in less than a month from 64 to 59, and more importantly, those who disapprove of his performance in office have grown by more than 50%, growing from 17 to 22. This is a pretty precipitous drop for a president.
Yeah, he's worried, and now he's going on Leno with the charm offensive. We're going to get into that with Bernie Goldberg after you. And yeah, but you know how it is. It's ebb and flow, it's ebb and flow, it's in and out, and all of that. Now, The AIG thing. If you were advising President Obama, and the reason I like you on the program so much is because you've been there. You've absolutely been there. So you're now advising President Obama, and you have a tremendous anger growing about this federal bailout of billions of taxpayers' dollars, and then they come in the door to AIG and they go out the back door to pinheads who blew it in the first place. So what do you tell President Obama to do about the AIG bonuses? What do you tell him to do?
Yeah. This is not a meeting you want to have at the White House. I mean, this is going to be an very unpleasant session with the president if you have to talk about this. Because here are a couple of facts. First of all, the more I look into this, the worse it gets. It turns out AIG announced a year ago that they would be giving, they thought, an estimated $400 million in bonuses to their employees. Now, they didn't specify that $165 million would go to the people in the derivatives unit who caused the big problem at AIG. Look, there are lots of parts of AIG that have been making money, always been making money, and are a good part of the company. This particular division, the Financial Services Division in Connecticut and London, is the entity that did all of these very complicated derivatives and blew up the company.
Right.
So, but they announced they were doing these bonuses a year ago. Second of all, Mr. Geithner was sitting in the room with Bernanke, Paulson, and Geithner last fall making these decisions about giving out TARP monies. If he had not been there, they could say, well, we weren't part of that, but he was in the room, and he either didn't ask about bonuses or didn't pay any attention to it. Third, this is a contract, and I think we've got to be very careful, even when the government injects money into businesses, to have the government say, we're going to abrogate a contract. It's one thing to have the company renegotiate a contract, but otherwise we end up like Argentina. So I think the best thing to do is to walk in and say, Mr. President, this is not going to be a good situation, but if you want to keep open the possibility of getting support in Congress for additional money to help the banks, then you got to say, one, we made a mistake by not paying enough attention to these bonuses. Two, we're not going to make that mistake going forward. We're going to have tough rules. And third, we're going to talk to the company about seeing if there are ways that we can get the taxpayer money back. But there is no way for this thing to be solved in a good way. There just isn't. The administration needs to say it's a mistake, and we won't let it happen again.
The bonuses cannot go on taxpayer money, so we have to pull back whatever bonuses they paid out. They have to give that money back to the Treasury. That's the solution. Mr. Rowe, always a